In our main topic here on Mastering Dungeons this week, we are going to take a look at the best of Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. This is the next installment in our Best of series as we take a look back at all of the 5e adventure modules that were released by Wizards of the Coast and taking from them what we think is the best out of them so that we can carry those ideas forward into our own game design. What do you think, Teos? Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
I mean, it's a big challenge, right? People had been asking for high-level play. They hadn't had, really high-level play since TMAT. We talked about how the previous adventure, it goes to levels 5. So here is 5 to 20. And sometimes people say, why doesn't D&D recognize mega dungeons? Well, they never take us to mega dungeons. And so now you can go into those dungeons, and I'm holding up the gold coin from Waterdeep that was part of both adventures. And so, you can go get all your coins down in the depths. And we'll talk about the premise and the approach and how they go at it, because mega dungeons, that a lot of people say they love them. A lot of people say they don't. And so that is a challenge design wise.
So let's take a quick look. But first, our disclaimer. We are aware that this adventure, like any adventure, is not perfect. We don't want to focus on the negative, though. We want to focus on the positive. But we need to say that we are aware that there may not be a complete positive about this adventure. We may love it. We may not actually like it all that much. But we want to focus on the positive. So we are going to do that here.
Yeah, so history-wise, my friend Shawn, this was announced as part of that Stream of Many Eyes event in June 2018. And Dragon Heist, of course, had the majority of the attention as being sort of the main showcase adventure, but it was also that idea of and when you're done with that, you can go right into this. It was published September of 2018, takes you from levels 5 to 20. Lead designer is Christopher Perkins, but then the designers is where it really gets cool and interesting. Bill Benham, Lisa Penrose, Keel Chenier, Dan Dillon, Claire Hoffman, James Introcaso, Greg Marks, Alan Patrick, Ben Petrozor, and Travis Woodall.
Yeah, I want to take a second to talk about this group because we recognize some of them as Wizards of the Coast employees. But we also recognize many of them are organized playwriters, specifically administrators of the Adventures League campaign, who know a thing or two about creating adventures that are fun, that are playable, that are runnable by DMs of all skill levels, all abilities, all tastes, and all levels of preparation. Sometimes I see game designers move over to become adventure designers, and as talented as they are, you can tell that they've never written adventures and seen other people run them. Because they either fall back on some of the standard wisdom of adventure writing, which isn't always true. And it's almost like they've only learned the lessons from the players that they've run directly for. And so I am always super keen to see these folks who have worked in organized play, who have written adventure after adventure after adventure, and seen in person the results of that work, not from themselves, but from all of these other folks who are participating. And I generally like that sort of adventure that comes out of that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's always intersection, right? Because someone will have given those awesome admins a brief of some sort. Depends by the project, how detailed it is. But, so you've got to apply your ideas to someone else's and then get through that process, which can sometimes be a joy and sometimes a challenge. Speaking of editors,
often both.
Wesley Schneider was an editor who I think then was at Paizo and would later join Wizard staff. Kate Welch, who had recently joined the team, I think just before that maybe even during that project, I don't recall. Timing is always hard when it happens behind the scenes. There are a number of inspirational works that are listed. Ed Greenwood's Ruins of Undermountain, which is downstairs. 4 expansions between 1994 and 1996. Expedition to Undermountain in 2007. Halls of Undermountain. You got your copy there, Shawn? Yeah. That was 2012 for 4th edition. I always love that cover. And the 2 maps inside. It has a map of the Yawning Portal, which is really cool, and Undermountain.
So here, just for scale, here is the map of Undermountain. I'm sorry, the first level of Undermountain. And I don't even know where I am on the screen right now. This is the first level of many levels. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't have a panel folded out. There we go.
Yeah. Move it to one side or the other. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that. That's how huge this was, and that was very, I think, 1E type inspired, right? Of like just a maze and maze of corridors. And if I recall correctly, the original version, it didn't list all rooms. Like sometimes it just had rooms for you to populate, right? Am I right on that?
Populate, yeah, you're absolutely right in that, because there's no way you could fill all of this up in a reasonable product or reasonable products if this is just the first level and there are, however many plus levels. So that all of that inspired this. There was also an AL season that involved both Dragon Heist and a heavy amount of Undermountain based around the location of Skullport, which we'll talk about more later. There are also many related works that weren't direct tie-ins to the season, but they were there either as inspiration or as a follow-up. The D&D Encounters season number 1, the very first one, was called Undermountain, Halaster's Lost Apprentice, written by Eric Scott DeBee, released in March of 2010. The first event in the revamped D&D Open in 2016, 10 years ago last week, took place in Undermountain and involved Halaster before the Dungeon of the Mad Mage had been even outlined. And there have been many crossover products involving Undermountain throughout D&D's history, from novels to video games to so much more.
Yeah, really incredible minis and any number of sets and really incredible. And so one of the things that's tough with these kinds of projects is you're trying to honor that history, but also put a spin on it. And every one of these products that we mentioned has had that goal and that challenge. One of the ways that it's often explained is, well, Halaster is a super powerful archmage who created this place. So you know what? Periodically they change it. And things like the spell plague come along and so on. And so that's why these products are all a little bit different as they tweak the experience, but also pay homage to what came before. And we certainly see that with this product. It speaks to older products, sometimes even things like web supplements, but it does so with that kind of care that comes from people who understand that history, but also that you have to modernize a bit. Yeah,
and I'll talk to you a little bit about that when we get to other parts of this talk. But just last week on Roll20, I noticed, and Teos noticed as well, that Blue Sky posted for Roll20 that there has been a huge update to Dungeon of the Mad Mage on Roll20, adding map pins to the entire dungeon with information on locations throughout the adventure. So for 40% off, you can get this adventure through June 7th on Roll20. Very cool. I think they're doing that just because we're talking about it, Teos.
Clearly.
It's got to be the case.
Yeah, I'm excited for them to just contact us next time so we just can have the information ahead of time. That's great.
Yep. Appreciate that. So let's talk about the best of this adventure. And we can't talk about the best of this adventure without talking about the premise and the approach, not just to this adventure, but to dungeons and mega dungeons in general. And so this is, I will admit, we're going to be light on talking about specifics of this adventure a little bit because it's so broad, it's so vast, but the important parts of it are what it does. And so we have to talk about that first. The game is called Dungeons and Dragons. Dragons are important. Dungeons are important. So dungeons have always been important to D&D. Mega dungeons, though, are a wonderfully divisive form of adventure content. And a mega dungeon doesn't get more mega than Undermountain. as you can see when I held this map up, that was one level. You're talking hundreds of locations just on one level.
Yeah.
So the premise of many dungeons and most mega dungeons is that everything in it is chaotic. It's narratively scattered for the most part. And it's more focused on the play of individual encounters and the weirdness that goes on with those encounters than there is on a longer plotted story.
Yeah.
For mega dungeons are the opposite of Edgar Allan Poe's unity of effect approach, right? Poe said, for short fiction, all words that you put down should lead toward the denouement, should lead toward the end, should bring to mind an effect. With mega dungeons, you can't do that because they're way too large. It's not like if I write a 2-hour adventure, I want everything to point to the end or to the theme or to something that brings the players and the game master forward. With a mega dungeon, you're throwing darts at a dartboard, and sometimes you're also picking up random objects and throwing them at the dartboard. And sometimes you're throwing darts at the furniture and the walls and your pets.
And the dartboard itself.
Yeah, you're throwing the dartboard at the dartboard. Yeah. It's crazy and it's all over the place. So how does this product approach it? We get a very solid start. Go ahead.
I mean, I think the Yawning Portal is a really good start to it, right? Because you start in an evocative place that isn't yet what you're getting into, but hints at it with that big, dark, chasm below, which if you look at the history section, which we'll talk about, is interesting as well. But that Yawning Portal gives you NPCs, gives you rumors, gives you sort of that initial sort of feeling of excitement to mimic how your character should feel about going in there. And then when we get down into each level has a theme and a sort of function in the play experience. Each level in Dungeon of the Mad Mage has several important creatures that are defined up front, and something's hanging in the balance, right? They have agendas. There is a thing they're about to try to accomplish. There is a thing that has gone wrong that they're trying to right, something like that. And that means that the heroes coming in act as catalysts and can accomplish or change something beyond just exploring, which is fun and neat. And of course, there's the zany stuff. There are all those kind of scene-based things. But that larger theme and those goals of those creatures, that thing that can change, that makes it a big deal. And one thing that's throughout it is the mystery of Halaster and his apprentices. The idea that he came long ago with these 7 apprentices, and some of them are still alive, and what are they doing? Particularly in this adventure is it's Asturia and Trobriand. Those two are part, and then one that tried to go against Halaster as well. And so those 3 in particular create an interesting narrative here as you try to sort of figure out what this is all about.
Yeah. So one of the best things about this adventure is how it does both things. How it takes this idea of the mega dungeon and gives you some incredibly wacky and offbeat and difficult and strange challenges, while also focusing on the story that makes the players want to go to the next room, not for treasure necessarily, although that's always a thing, not to defeat monsters, although that can be a thing, but to figure out these shorter term goals while they unlock the longer term mysteries.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the history of the dungeon. The original dungeon was released in 1991 for second edition. So throughout its history, every product has made adjustments. Halaster, Black Cloak, is at the center of this dungeon. He has incredible lore beyond what we could cover today.
Yeah.
He hails from a very ancient empire and timeline. He came to this place with his apprentices. He found a tower underground. He found ruins. He explored them. He explored more. He explored more. The apprentices got involved, and then they realized maybe something's wrong. So some of them left, some of them stayed, and then he sort of disappeared. And this was before Waterdeep even existed. So slowly, a city grew atop this place that Halaster was building his underground tower. And everything just happened from there. The city just became Waterdeep over top of it.
Yeah. And he's digging with all these summoned creatures. His tower that he built up above falls into disrepair. He's digging for a couple of reasons. There are dwarven holds down below and lots to find there. But the reason that this is of particular importance is this whole area used to be an ancient elven kingdom. And the capital used to be in this location. And the elves of Illifarn used a powerful spell to hide the traces of that capital, and that left a permanent knot in the weave of magic deep underground. And that is the source of power that radiates out from where they did that manipulation of the weave. And what it does is a number of things. It's power you can tap into, but it also provides an obsession with the location itself. And so people in the dungeon become obsessed with the dungeon, including Halaster. So he is obsessed with endlessly working on it. Many of his apprentices, Durnan is affected by, right? Like lots of people and creatures are affected in different ways by that, not in the weave. And all of this, as it continues to be excavated and changed by the apprentices, by the summoned creatures, becomes Undermountain. It gets discovered early on by the people above in the city. They do things like throw criminals into it as punishment. But one guy who makes it is Durnan, Shawn. He succeeds.
Yes, Durnan goes down into Undermountain, finds hordes and hordes of magic and treasure, brings it back out, and then decides to build a tavern over the hole that he used to get into it and call it the Yawning Portal and start charging people money to be lowered into this place. It's, that's a good cover charge right there. Either to come in and be lowered into it or to watch other people be lowered into it, like worms on hooks for the hungry fish below.
Yeah, so what a great premise, right? Like, I mean, that tavern just, nails it. It's one of the best taverns in the Forgotten Realms in terms of just hitting that hook and nailing. Oh, you're showing the poster map with that big well.
This is the poster map of the Yawning Portal right here. Yeah. Again, huge. Now, this is the map that was in Halls of Undermountain that I had to draw the first draft of. And the first thing I did was say, okay, how big is the tavern and how big is the hole? And I went back and looked. And the funny thing is, when you draw it out on a battle map, it looks mammoth.
Yeah.
And people were like, that's too big. And I'm like, that's what the size is. It wasn't drawn out on battle maps back in the day. But that, according to lore, is the size of the hole that people are lowered into from the Yawning Portal.
Yeah.
So Durnan,
I was just gonna say it's fun to see. 5th edition then posits that the tavern has been expanded somewhat. So it's got some upper levels and things like that, because you have to work with that hole and how to still have enough space, like say to have a fight in the tavern or to make it logical. You actually have a lot of customers, and so they do a number of things to sort of stack it. And we even got a minis set from WizKids that changed prices and materials twice to try to lure in customers, and didn't seem to quite succeed the way Durnan's does in real life, in fantasy real life.
In fantasy real life. So the Yawning Portal is built over the outer wall of Halaster's old tower, which is now the well that leads down into the first level of Undermountain. Durnan again became famous and became rich as he explored Undermountain and then built this place. He charges 1 gold piece per person to descend. And this is a wonderful idea for, story-wise, adventure-wise, lore-wise, great stuff. Yeah. Always great to have a good tavern to start your adventure and a place people come back to, and this fits the bill there. So what are some of the hooks for this particular adventure?
Yeah, we get a couple of really good NPCs that are a lot of fun. Obaya Ude, Chultan Priestess of Joaquin, will pay for magic items and spell books. She'll take a certain amount, and then she heads back to Chult because she works for one of the merchant princes. And then Harper Spy Matrim Merig, known as 3 Strings, needs gold delivered to a half-drowned Skullport, poses as being this not very good bard, but actually is quite talented. So he's got a mission, and it can lead to more. As Vel Rosner has heard that her brother is up to no good. The Rosner family has a terrible reputation, and this would further tarnish that family name back to the way it was in the olden days. But he's vanished, and she wants him found. We said spoilers. He's dead, but you can discover how he died. Volo tells a tale of an alabaster throne and says the elves would like to know if it still survives. And later we get other quests, which is always nice when you get those initial quests, but you know that at some point they probably should come back and rest and recuperate. And that's when you hit them with additional quests to take them lower. And it's based on what level you are and things like that, what quests get deployed, or that you finish the first quest, then you get the next one. And we get a deck of secrets. Sorry.
Well, it's important. It's important to do that in a mega dungeon because you need to, if you put the secret that leads you to level 21 first, people are going to forget about it. So you want this cascading effect of secrets, goals, successes, more secrets as you descend into the dungeon. And as Teos said, we have secrets. So in the back of the book, there is a deck of secrets, and each player will get one as their characters interact with folks in the Yawning Portal. They can also get these secrets as they question beings that they meet in the dungeon. And this is a sort of a way to deliver new quests or to give information to spur the characters to pay attention as they interact with the folks, with the creatures, with the environs of Undermountain.
Yeah, and there's also a rune deck of special elder runes that have both beneficial and negative effects. And both of these things are nice nods to older Undermountain products, which were often box sets and had decks of random cards for locations and traps and things like that. So it's kind of nice to see the card aspect. That was a smart move by somebody. We get a whole thing on the dungeon features. We don't have to go into soup. Basically, you can't easily teleport in or out. If you try to contact Halaster with a sending spell, you end up at his Nothic secretary on level 9. Very funny. Halaster has 6 possible goals, and you can roll to see which one is active. It can even change. And there are various magic gates, and we're told how they generally work. But it can really be, at least 3 people must hold hands and sing. And then the thing unlocks. You just never know. But there are gates that lead between levels or to other places that break the usual restriction of not being able to easily get out of Undermountain or into it.
And it's important to note that Halaster repopulates Undermountain's monsters by various gates and teleportations. So just as monsters may get teleported in to become denizens of Undermountain, characters may just get grabbed and brought down at random. Based on Halaster's strange and ineffable magic. There you go.
Well, Shawn, now let's go through all 23 levels, room by room, every single hallway, door. No.
Yeah. Okay. So we will see you again in 2073.
We're going to beat Rime of the Frost Maiden for more up.
That's right. Challenge accepted. Those of you who are complaining about us covering that too much, you ain't seen nothing yet, baby.
No. All
right. So we're going to look at some of the best or most interesting levels, but we're just going to touch on them briefly. But level 1, I think we need to take a little time with because it is iconic. By virtue of being the first, this top level connecting to the Yawning Portal tap room has been played by tons, by thousands, by hundreds of thousands, by millions of players across several editions. And we get right at the beginning 2 gangs who have set up shop in level 1, and they are at war with each other. One is called the Undertakers, and they wear disguises to appear as vampires to either scare away or to actually defeat people that come down the well. So that they want you to think they're undead vampires who are scary, but they're also having an internal conflict as the 2 leaders who are ex-lovers are feuding with each other and trying to take control of the gang.
Love it.
The other gang down here is Xanathar's Guild, and they are there because you can access Skullport via Undermountain, and they want to stop people from just wandering in. So they have guards and sentries and other creatures there to stop people from getting there. So these two gangs are already fighting on level 1 as the characters are introduced into the level.
Yeah. And there is a lot that you can do with this. I recall we had some fun between the combination of goals and secrets. We had some good fun. When I played this, I forget whether, I think I may have play tested it. I'm not sure. But one thing that's also fun is Andy Demps showcased at Winter Fantasy one year how you can take like something like this and make it really interesting. And he did a scenario where you chose which of the employers to use in the Yawning Portal, jump in, deal with these different groups going around, and you were trying to find, I think it was tied into sort of the concept of the Dragon Heist itself, like trying to find NPCs that were down here. And using a sort of random method for generating which way the paths went. It just shows you like you can really come up with some really neat approaches around something like this. But in addition to these gang members and that, we have classic dungeon rooms. And I wanted to pick one that I really just find, well, two really, but this one's just fantastic dungeon, trouble, which is you walk into this area 14 called Little Box of Horrors. And we have a room with a domed ceiling. And you see up filling this dome is sizzling acid defying gravity. Right then your players go, okay, great.
Yeah. Okay.
There is in the center is an 8-foot tall statue of a 4-armed fish monster, which is actually a petrified Sahwagan Baron. And there are a lot of petrified creatures in there that you can unpetrify if you so choose. It's facing north. And in its webbed hands is an ornate 1-foot square stone box with a lid and a keyhole. If you open it any way that isn't with the key, the acid falls down on you. But you can find the key somewhere else. Inside the box is the withered heart of a tiefling wizard. You can attune to it as you would a magic item. And what does that do? Well, the withered heart switches places with your heart, which kills you. Your heart withers and dies and gains the same properties as the previous one, so the cycle can keep going. If you look around in room 24, you can find a dead mage tiefling who used to have the heart that's found here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you get these rooms that have nothing to do with the main plot, but are still wacky and fun and wild. And the Undermountain would not be Undermountain without them.
Yeah, and subplots like Area 36. I love Grix as a monster. I always think they look cool. I think they play well. And this area is a classic with several little sub rooms. And this is where we get introduced to this adventuring party called Fine Fellows of Daggerford, who came down here. And their thief snuck off and found a spell book. But when they did that, it roused a bunch of Grix. He sealed himself up in this closet and will reward anyone who rescues him. We can learn the fate of the other members of the Fine Fellows of Daggerford throughout the adventure. Some of them pretty far down in levels. And one even became a revenant after being murdered by his companions. We'll hire you to find the killers. That happens pretty early on. But later, some of the stories of where they ended up it's really quite interesting. And Grix are fun. There's a Grick Alpha in a room with an upside down stone throne suspending on the ceiling with a mummified minotaur sitting in it with gems in its eyes and a great axe. Looks terrifying. Doesn't do anything. The top half is reverse gravity. You can, get there and, grab any of the stuff, get the gems. The only thing that's dangerous is that one Grick Alpha.
Yeah. Just absolutely great design. After you put a withered heart in here where it kills you instantly, over here you put something that looks dangerous, but just go grab the gems. You're good. So level 1 has its own story and its own challenges. Not every room of the hundreds of rooms are detailed, because you can't. But that leaves room for you as the game master to add your own story, to add your own encounters, to extend the story that's already there a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's just level 1. Level 2 are called the Arcane Chambers. Famously over the years, they have been that. On this level, goblins who oppose the Xanathar run a sort of bazaar, a trading post, if you will. The leader of these goblins was transformed into a human by a magic item. So he's taller than all the other goblins, which the goblins that he leads are starting to resent. The Arcane studies here mutated former Halaster's apprentices. And so there's this interplay between the goblins and the followers of Xanathar here.
Yeah, and one of my favorite rooms, another classic, is you walk in 30-foot square room and it's got a skull in the center. And if you get a good enough read on it, you realize it's a Duergar skull. And what has happened is it is, of course, not floating or levitating. It is in the center of a 30-foot square gargantuan gelatinous cube that has managed to enlarge itself the way the Duergar once enlarged itself, right? That native ability that they have. And it's just completely absurd. It's something Halaster, blessed this particular skull with, and it's coated in something that makes it resistant, and so it stays inside of it. But you can, in fact, get it to shrink down, and it's just one of those fun, quirky things, right?
Mm-hmm. And so what we did was we went to our Discord and we said, "Hey, folks, those of you that played this adventure or ran this adventure, what are some of your favorite things on the different levels?" And we got some interesting answers. So on Discord, Walt Winfrey says, "Skullport / level 3 is the easy answer as to the best. The town is full of adventure possibilities, and it's easy to spend months just dealing with the Xanathar Guild and Skullport's other inhabitants. The warring drow and hobgoblin clans also give lots of opportunity for a fistful of dollars situation. This level feels more like a mini campaign setting than a dungeon of its own." And that's very true. Any of these individual levels, you could run several levels of characters through, and have a full campaign there.
And I loved how AL intersected with campaigns back then. The AL storyline heavily involved a piece in Skullport and what the Xanathar was up to. And so you can just see how the AL took the idea of Skullport and ran with it as this campaign hub, and all of these different plots that were going on, all added to what you get in this book.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the other levels, Teos, that either stood out to you or stood out to some of our listeners?
Yeah. Walt also noted the conflict between the drow houses that take place in level 13. Keeping them from gaining footholds while playing them off each other became the main front for his Undermountain games. And he says, still is to this day, that campaign is still going, which is awesome. I loved that when this came out, Spelljammer wasn't out yet. And so this is Spelljammer before Spelljammer, with a number of nods, including level 16, the Crystal Labyrinth. This is an area that Githyanki have taken over, and there is a gate to Stardock, a hollowed out asteroid orbiting Toril. They mount raids from here on the level below, which has mind flayers. A lot of great lore, things like, the Gith can't age, so they bring their young in the astral plane, so they bring them here to mature and train, and they've called Stardock Kresh Kalir. Various pits here lead to the astral plane, some weird crystalline golems and stuff like that. Red dragons that they ride, and they're all related, so it's personal if you take one out and then later meet Mama. And just really cool that breaking things up that way to where you suddenly are like, wait, am I looking out at outer space and I'm on an asteroid? That changes up your dungeon a fair bit. Level 17, Flump, Shawn. We get lots of Flumps. That's all you need.
Mind players.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if you like that.
So level 17 is called Sea Deeps, and it does, in fact, have Flumps and mind players. There's a new creature called a Eulithirid. It's named Extrematon, and it leads other mind flayers and can sense intelligent creatures within 2 miles and communicate with them, including the player characters. So the Extrematon wants to understand the city, so it's capturing Waterdavians and putting them in psi-pods. So it's a very Matrix feel. And there's an illusionary version of Waterdeep called Alterdeep, where the Illithids here and the Extrematon in particular can study their interactions. So the characters may enter a sort of psychic version of Waterdeep called Alterdeep and interact with folks there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can make all your jokes about how you used to love the noodles at that one Waterdeep place, and you realize they're not real. But I love the idea that if your PCs die, you could just ship them into this alternate version. I think that's just hilarious way to deal with a TPK. Level 18 has a nice story about the Moonstar family. Waterdeep nobles the brother turns to the worship of Shar, and he gets banished from his family. He becomes a Death Knight. His dragon, who's a bronze dragon, becomes a shadow dragon. And the dragon is still around, and there are vampire cleric of Shar that's in the area. But you get visions. I always like visions in games. You get visions throughout the area that tell you the story of this family and the tragic demise of Vanrak Moonstar and the changes to the dragon. And so you can actually potentially reach the shadow dragon on Braxikar and not just fight it, but actually potentially free it from its curse by bringing items that belonged to Vanrak and kind of pulling that care back out of the dragon and returning it to be a bronze dragon again. Very cool. Level 19 has a Spelljammer called the Scavenger without its helm. And I'm, looking at the maps and I was like, oh, that is, one of these cuttlefish or squid ships from the old Spelljammer setting. And our friend Jeff Miller says, Mind Flayer Pirate. Mind Flayer Pirate. And there is indeed a pirate who's been locked in his ship and he's been feeding off of bottled brains that he's surviving on. And so he will attack you, but then he'll also eventually decide that maybe he needs to work with you to accomplish something, and we'll try that. Almost all the mind flayers in this adventure will potentially work with you, but they will try to eat you and turn on you at some point. Yeah. What else, Shawn?
This level has this comedic aspect that has like silly singing ooze creatures, and you can get a magic pogo stick,
dueling genies.
Or propeller hat.
Oh yeah.
And some of you might be like, oh, I hate silly stuff. But if you have 23 levels of an adventure, you want the pacing to be different. You want the themes. You want the tone. You want to mix things up. Yeah. So even the most, dramatic, engaged in the story sort of player or game master should not fault an adventure for trying out different things if it's done on the scale of this adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are levels where the apprentices Trobriand or Arcturia kind of shine in their ways. But one of the ones I really like is level 21, Terminus. Around this time, your 16th level. And there's a planetar named Fazrian, who, due to that group of adventurers we talked about before, ended up being sort of summoned to this place because they were seeking help. And so the planetar began to eliminate all the evil that he saw in Undermountain. But remember that Undermountain knotweave started changing him and making him obsessed with Undermountain, became obsessed with cleansing it. And now he is in this court surrounded by evil creatures like Yugoloths and Dwergar. Yes, they were neutral at one point. And it's possible but it's a very difficult thing. Take the right steps and you can show Fazrian how they've strayed and possibly find that last little bit inside of him that knows he's doing the wrong thing. And that can be a major role-playing challenge. Also, it's important to say that a lot of these situations, right, you're getting chunks of text that explain the situation really well, but you get to decide how it plays out. And so a lot of these things, it's like, that certain things will happen, but what the players say, what their characters do, that's going to be what really matters and drives the story one way or the other. But I like that whole setup with that planetar. It's very cool.
Mm-hmm. And then we get the final level. We have to talk about the first and the last. Level 23 is the Mad Wizard's Lair. Yeah. This is the home of Halaster and his apprentices, Arcturia and Trobriand. So the events on previous levels can shape how this goes. Halaster is fragmented. His mind is working on many different levels at once, sometimes very rational and sane, usually far from that. But Halaster is curious and will grant an audience to the characters. What goes on there depends on The whims of the DM, the players, and what the players have done up to this point. The two apprentices, Arcturia is a fey-like lich with gossamer wings and strange bone spurs from her forearms and elbows, and will attack if their phylactery was destroyed. She keeps animal-headed humanoids around to entertain and keep her company, whereas Trobriand is the metal mage. So he is encased in metal, the suit of an iron golem, and all about the constructs. Trobriand is the one who created Scaladar, which are metal scorpion constructs that can attack you with lightning.
Yeah, this whole area feels just like a very cool wizard's location. Lots of libraries with spell books, special magical effects, arcane tricks, interesting statues, things like that. There are two magic, like there's one room where like it just counterspells any spell you cast, this statue. There are two magic shields here in different rooms, one containing a pit fiend, another a deva. They communicate telepathically with the wielder and want to find the other shield that's got to be somewhere around here. And if you bring them close to each other, they both come out, which is just chaos, right? And we'll see something like that in Descent into Avernus. The Mind Flayer Pirate's spelljamming helm is here, so if you find it and didn't kill them, you could actually let them get out, or you could have your own spelljamming ship. Halaster's tower is inside of a demiplane accessible from this level, and there are lots of surprises, right? You walk in and there's demi-lich brewing potions, a cauldron that if you drink from it, it allows you to cast Time Stop once in the next 24 hours. A lot of like, sure, why not? A Gate to Icewind Dale, one to Tribor, a flying saucer, a room with two flesh golems exercising because why not? And there is a room with portraits of all 7 apprentices, so you can kind of round out that lore. The one of Jassyria Kestelharp, she is featured in other parts of the adventure as being an apprentice that really tried to oppose Halaster, and her voice will whisper to the characters. The portrait is slashed because Halaster's mad at her, and you can find a ring that kind of comes out of the painting that lets you ignore Undermountain's magic restrictions and could prove very valuable if you're facing off against Halaster. And her voice will give you other tips during the adventure, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, she is within the walls of Undermountain. So she is there sort of, as a cool story element, but also as a guide for you as the game master to use to help the players along if they need a little nudge in any certain direction.
Yeah.
We get appendices. We get new monsters, including Halaster, who is a CR23 wizard. We get an Archdruid stat block champion, Githyanki Gish, Lava Child, a Neothalid, and an Ulathalid. The Neothalid is if the what are they called? The little Mind Flayer tadpoles.
Yeah.
If the tadpoles begin to eat each other, only one can survive from their litter. And so it becomes a super enormous tadpole as opposed to a regular illithid.
Yeah.
And
very
the
freaky
Ulatharid
looking miniature you can get of that, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah. The Ulatharid is a souped up illithid who becomes like a leader of Mind Flayers when they are created. Yeah. You get the Metal Scorpion Scaladar, the Shadow Assassin, and everyone's favorite, the Werebat. Werebat, they're bat.
Okay.
The other appendices are that rune deck that we talked about, which will let you cast alternative versions of the symbol of spells, which are cool. And then, of course, that secret deck that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, very cool.
So overall, really great toolkit for game masters.
Yeah.
Even if you're not going to run it page for page, you can find encounters in here that you can use elsewhere. Or you can just grab your favorite level and run it sort of as a one-off, setting it anywhere you'd like.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things to do is kind of you note those different, because each level is based for a level now, or for a particular character level. And interestingly, they're done for 4 characters, which is good probably because you do enough rooms, it gets really hard. So that's probably a good way to set the difficulty. But so you can just look at that list of levels and be like, okay, my characters are X level. If I want to go into an interesting dungeon, I can pull that level and use it. And there are some things that are nice that change it up that we didn't mention. Like, for example, places that feel like you're outdoors, even though you're indoors, right? Because the cavern is magically changed to look like a forest or the, light of the moon or whatever it might be. And so that can change the experience up too, which is worth noting that there's some nice ones where if you're doing a sort of mega dungeon, these can help you bring in something that changes up your dungeon.
So with that, we will thank everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed this review. And thank you to our patrons. Those patrons have gone to patreon.com/masteringdnd, and they have backed us, given us a little bit of their hard-earned money to keep these lights on here, to keep us in business, if you will. So we want to thank you all for doing that, whether you're a Master of Dungeon supporter, a Master of Realms supporter, or a Master of the Multiverse. Those latter two tiers also get free game content that we create for folks. And so you can look for more of that content. You've already gotten some monsters. You've already gotten some magic items. I see maybe an encounter or two in your future if you hang in long enough. But for those Masters of the Multiverse, you know what happens now. Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of the Monsters Know What They're Doing, Louis Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bosch John from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimble Co., Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Curmandy, Schwill from Maine, Lefstria, Chad Lench, Paul Mata, the Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip N. Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talus the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Viduocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Z. Wald Winfrey. Thank you all so much for your support. Again, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also help us out by leaving us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Or if you go to YouTube, you can subscribe, you can comment, you can give us all the likes and the thumbs and that stuff. And you get to look at us too, which for some is a benefit, for others, a horror. Yeah. Teos, where can people find you and the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, find more of my horror at alphastream.org. I might try to do a video for the 5-room dungeon, which is going on this week, a collaboration that Daddy is running on his channel and others as well, kind of bringing people together around 5-room dungeon concepts. I've done a bunch of those in the past. We'll see if I can have it in me because I am doing a lot of sun cracking these days, Shawn.
There is a lot of sun cracking going on for sure. Yeah, you can find me on the socials at Shawn Merwin or follow the podcast on the socials at Mastering D&D. And again, you can also go to that YouTube channel and leave comments and let us know what you think. Teos, we have survived all 23 levels of Undermountain and are none the worse for wear. So what are we going to do now?
Well, I'm going to go into my backyard and just start digging. And, Halaster, that's a good example. If you just try hard enough, eventually you can accomplish a 23rd level dungeon.
That's true. I'm going to start at level 23 and work my way backward
Oh,
because that's how I roll.